We're discussing Bitcoin, the entire crypto landscape, and what's next for Binance with co-CEO Richard Teng. Richard's going to be discussing with us his outlook for the Bitcoin landscape, as well as what users can expect on Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange, for the remainder of 2026. Welcome back to the show, Richard. Good to see you. Many things to discuss today.
Great to see you again, David.
I'd like to ask you first about the Bitcoin investment landscape. Several guests on my show have been talking about how Bitcoin has fundamentally changed from a retail asset to an institutional asset. And because of that, maybe the 4-year cycle has been affected, if not changed completely. Because before it was primarily driven by retail investment interest, and now it's driven mostly by institutional demand. Can you just evaluate that thesis? Is that true?
Well, I think different people believe in different narrative, right? So the institutional narrative is definitely correct, right? So in past cycle is mainly a retail play, right? For the longest time, the institutions, the corporates, the regulators were sitting on the sideline. And this cycle definitely see a lot more institutional interest. On our platform, we see very robust interest. I mean, with the introduction of ETF that provide other forms of access into the areas of Bitcoin, I think all those are very exciting. And you have seen a slight maturity in terms of Bitcoin and crypto, and it has now become more and more mainstream into the financial services infrastructure. So I think all those are important. But I mean, personally, this is my own view. I still believe in the 4-year cycle because, you know, with the halving episode and scarcity coming into play, on a 4-year basis, I do believe that is still at play. The cost of mining is still important. So, I mean, different people believe in different narrative, but I do believe that the scarcity of Bitcoin, again, is something that will come into play.
But how do you think the user base of Binance has evolved from the last couple of years to 2026? And given this evolution, how do you think Binance will continue to adapt into the future to changing consumer needs?
Well, again, I do think that it is now a more mature market, is much more robust on that front. Because in the past, when it's just mainly retail, I mean, the base was a lot of retail. And when you have, you know, sort of users that's quite one-dimensional in terms of the characteristics. The challenge is the asset class become very volatile, right? So you typically have less diversity in terms of strategy, in terms of outlook, in terms of investment pattern. But when you have, institutions, corporates, and in many instances, sovereigns coming into play, they have different investment appetite, they have different investment thesis, horizon, and that adds to the diversity of different areas of investments and how the investment dimension change on that front. But you need to have people and investors with different outlook of the market to create a much more vibrant market. So I do think that going forward, you'll be even more robust. And it's quite exciting to see that grow. So even in this cycle, right? So, the retail are sitting on the sideline, but the institutions and the smart money are adding on to their portfolio because they have a very robust outlook of this particular asset class. And they tend to invest for very long term in terms of returns, right? So it's quite interesting to see all those dynamics coming into play. And that makes for a much better and much more robust and healthier marketplace.
Okay. So many important Bitcoin investors, including Michael Saylor, have commented on the recent price correction from all the way from the highs late last year in October to $60,000 in Bitcoin. He said earlier in June, capital markets are funding the AI build-out at historical scale, $400 billion over 6 months. Bitcoin ETFs have seen $4 billion of outflows since May 14th, pressuring BTC price. This is a capital rotation, not a Bitcoin impairment. Volatility creates opportunity. Do you agree? Are you seeing evidence that investors are rotating temporarily into tech away from crypto?
Well, it happens. Every time asset class becomes hot or popular, you tend to see funds flow into that asset class, right? It happens throughout the history of investment market. So this is something that's quite natural. And with, Binance Research have put up some research on that front to show the correlationship every time S&P, Nasdaq reach all-time high, you probably take away some liquidity from the Bitcoin market. But as with all asset class, you'll go through cycles, they're up and down cycle, and the money will flow accordingly based on what people and investors perceive as undervalued, as having greater potential for growth going to the future. So money will continue to adjust and flow itself, right? So people will reassess, hey, is there overvaluation happening in one asset class? Is it too hot? Is it viable? Are the earnings sustainable, etc., etc.? And then smart money will make the adjustments. And retail, in many instances, will follow those trends as well, right? So indeed, we are seeing some of those. But also, I do believe that some part of the 4-year cycle is coming into play on that front. But I think what's important is to look at the narrative, right? So if you look at the fundamental building blocks, the fundamental infrastructure of financial services, they're all built on blockchain. They're all built on crypto going forward, right? So if you look at the financial services rails such as stablecoin, yes, stablecoin transaction volume has surpassed some of the payment rails globally on that front. It shows very robust growth. Tokenization, which is another very, very important use case of crypto and blockchain, right? Again, has grown exponentially in the course of the last year or so, grown by, I believe, based on data that I saw, 25 times, and it continues to grow, right? Financial institutions are embracing it now. They're putting a lot of assets on chain, including Nasdaq and NYSE. They are moving on chain, moving to 23/5 trading in the first instance, but I believe they are going to 24/7 trading over the long term. So the more assets are put on chain, the better it is for platforms like ourselves, right? So we can really support our global users in terms of that investment access, in terms of areas that previously were closed to them. Now, players like ourselves, once these assets are on chain, we can provide accessibility and become important price discovery avenues for all these asset points.
Before we continue with the video, let me tell you about a very important topic, which is your personal information. Now, your personal privacy is of utmost importance, probably even more so than your personal assets. And your personal information is likely online right now. Your full name, home address, and phone numbers are sitting on data broker websites that anybody can access or buy. I bet you probably didn't know that. So that's exactly why I use Delete Me. Our sponsor today, Delete Me, removes your private information from hundreds of data broker sites, and since June 2024, it's removed 204 of my listings, and my latest report shows 335 listings were reviewed last month. That's what I like. It's consistently and constantly checking so nothing slips through. Getting started is straightforward and easy. Just submit your information, and in about a week or so, you'll get a report showing where your data was found and what was removed. And it doesn't stop there. Delete Me keeps scanning the internet and removes your data throughout the year. So go to joindeleteme.com/David Lin, link in the description down below, or scan the QR code here and use my promo code David Lin at checkout. New users who use my code will get 20% off of all US plans. Take your privacy seriously before somebody else does. How do you think blockchain and AI will converge in terms of use case? And how is Binance positioned to capture this convergence?
Well, they are really complementary assets, right? So if you look at it, right, AI in a nutshell makes things much more efficient, much more accurate, and blockchain by its nature is immutable, right? So just a very simple case study. So if you look at financial services, financial industry in general, if you look at middle and back office of financial institutions, right, what they are doing now is clearing, settlement, reconciliation work. But that entire operation, if you put the assets on chain, right, through blockchain technology and use AI, a lot of middle and back office today, instead of T+2 settlement, which is very arcade and you see in many parts of the world, or you need at least a day or 2 days to get assets properly settled and clear. There are in blockchain, we use atomic settlement. It's instantaneous, right? At a fraction of the price in what you see in financial services. I mean, stablecoin versus, if you do traditional payment rails, if you try to remit money cross border, it takes 2 days at very high cost, right? Which is a very important showcase of how financial services landscape can transform. So just to take a very simple case study of middle and back office, the entire landscape, that entire function will be changed drastically going forward with the combination of blockchain crypto technology plus AI.
5 years ago, roughly, what was the trading volume on Binance that was just Bitcoin? And what is that percentage now? What is the breakdown between Bitcoin versus
off the
the
top of my
others
head,
now?
I don't have those figures, unfortunately.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
but you can
Just
can
give
try
us
to.
a rough idea of how maybe it's evolved. Yeah.
Well, so even 2 years ago, right? So if you look at our user base, even 2 years ago, we are roughly 170 million customers. Today, we are 320 million customers, right, on that front. And many more of these customers are institutions, are corporates. We have sovereigns coming to join us on that front. So firstly, if you look at the composition of users and investors, they are changing slightly. And there's greater diversity, which makes for much better marketplace, much more diversity, much more robust, and much more vibrant on that front. But also, people come to us not just for crypto now. I mean, it is towards our ambition to be a financial super app. Now we have 320 million customers globally. I think not many financial app in the world can lay claim to that, right? So we provide access today not only to crypto, but to stocks. I mean, our ambition is to expand them to stocks, ETF, tokenized assets, payments, private market opportunities that are now available on our market. Things like SpaceX, pre-IPO perpetuals. So just to give you some insights on that front, right? So this is real and this is happening in real time, right? So we have offered pre-IPO perpetuals on SpaceX. We account for 60% of the trading of the pre-IPO perpetuals on SpaceX, right? So that is huge itself. So about 3 billion was traded on pre-IPO perpetual on SpaceX alone, and we account for like 60% of that. But more importantly is the point of access, right? So in terms of stocks trading coming onto our platform, about 6 to 7% of the traders are completely new to our platform. So they come to us because as an ecosystem, we provide them access to many other product classes other than just crypto, right? And I think interestingly, 80% of the users, traders of our stock trading function are from emerging market, and a quarter of them are below 25 years old. So, and many of those from emerging market, those they're much younger, they're locked out in terms of traditional markets, in terms of access. So we provide them with access, and some of them invest in small dollar denomination. 40% of trades are below $100, but they are net buyers. 70% of the daily users are buyers rather than sellers. So all these are important data points to consider. So what this means is this: we provide access to many people that previously have no access. If you look at globally, only about 630 million stock trading account are available. I mean, people have access. So about 11% of global population have stock trading account, and many don't have because of market structure, because of friction in their local marketplace, because it's just not available to them, right? And they're not familiar. And we are giving them access to opportunities that previously unavailable. For example, pre-IPO, all these private market opportunities are not available to many investors around the world, right? Even to sophisticated investors, they are not available. So we are providing a very important access point. We are providing a very important price discovery venue. In fact, we are the dominant price discovery venue before SpaceX IPO on that front. And on the first day of IPO, the trading volume on our platform for SpaceX reached close to $6 billion. So I think all these are very important data points to show that the access is real. The emerging market demand for all these emerging market opportunities and private market opportunities are very, very robust. We introduced B stocks about a week back, and today we have accumulated 100 in terms of stocks. AUM, we introduced them for about a month now. Our AUM has crossed 800 million. And so I think it is very, very good that we as a financial super app are able to support user across different bases, across different geography in terms of their investing need, not only in crypto, but in terms of ETF, in terms of stocks, in terms of all these private market opportunities, payments, and product. So this is something that we will continue to push in terms of the agenda to make sure that this entire product offering and product suite continue to be very robust and meet the needs of users from different market.
Besides the fact that we can participate in pre-IPO securities, what other benefits do investors have by investing in tokenized securities, which is what B stocks is, launched on June 11th. So last week, B stocks are tokenized one-to-one US securities in Binance that trade 24/7. Why would someone buy a tokenized share of, let's say, Tesla versus just a Tesla stock itself?
No, there's beauty of it. So just in terms of B stock trading, right? So close to 50% of B stocks trading happen outside of US trading hours, right? Showing the benefit of 24/7 trading, right? So that's one. And then secondly, once an asset is on chain, you can do a lot more things with it. You can transfer quite easily. If you look at traditional marketplace, if you try to transfer a stock for either collateral purposes or other earn purposes, it is very, very cumbersome, right? But once it's on chain, you can do a lot of activities. You can do a lot more things with it on chain vis-a-vis the traditional infrastructure and structure on that front. So I think there's a lot of attractiveness. People can do a lot of yield enhancement with the asset. They can do collateral management. They can do transfer on a much easier basis compared to before. So it's gaining traction and it's getting quite popular.
But it's the underlying is backed one-to-one on
the underlying
is Binance Reserve?
That's right. The underlying is backed one.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. And tell us about what this product signals when it comes to consumer demand and what they are interested in. So prior to maybe this year and last year, the interest was Bitcoin and various different tokens and layer ones and perhaps layer twos. Now we're looking at tokenized real-world assets. Do you think that tokenized real-world assets could one day eclipse crypto market cap?
Well, if you look at real assets, they eclipse the crypto market cap, right? So, and today we only have a very small sliver of assets that's being tokenized at this point in time, right? So, probably about 30 billion that's being tokenized on a global basis, even though that figure is growing very, very quickly. But as financial institutions and corporates embrace it, I mean, if you talk to the major US financial institutions, they are all looking at how do you tokenize assets? How do they tokenize assets on our platform? Because if you think through it, right, the beauty of it today, most assets are just traded 9 to 5, 9 to 4:30, depending on the banking hours or the financial institution hours, right? Outside of those hours, users bear huge liquidity risks, right? So you can't take positions effectively, you can't divest, you can't manage your risk effectively during the non-trading hours, during weekends. But with many of these asset class, whether it's commodities, whether it's stocks, whether it's crypto, developments happen on 24/7 basis. World events happen on a 24/7 basis that have impact on commodity prices, that have impact on stock prices, demand for all this. And when you cannot manage your risk, that impose a lot of risk on both the retail as well as institutional investors. So which is why all these product class that we put on our platform to be traded on a 24/7 basis. As I mentioned, B stocks, close to 50% of B stocks are traded outside US trading hours. So that shows, there's huge demand for investors to take positions, to manage their existing positions, and to hedge risk, which is extremely important in risk management, including for institutions and corporate investors. So the trend to go is 24/7. Added to that, agentic trading, right? Where, and that pattern is going to be 24/7. Data is coming through all the time. And you can manage your portfolio on a much better basis, your investments on a much better basis on a 24/7 basis. So all these are the trends that we're going to see. And I do think there's going to be quite an aggressive move by financial institutions to move assets on chain, right? So even the largest of equity markets, Nasdaq and NYSE, have highlighted their ambition on that front to move assets on chain. You see Swift, even Swift is forced to do blockchain experimentation and say, hey, you know, this technology is coming our way. And you know, that just is a pronouncement of how impactful crypto and blockchain is, right? So going forward, it will be a very important fundamental layer of the financial infrastructure.
Okay, let's talk about some of the biggest news surrounding regulations in Binance this week. So front and center on everyone's minds for Binance users is the MiCA deadline in Europe. So just as a bit of context, this is a Reuters article here. Binance set to lose permission to operate in EU. This is on June 16th. Under new EU rules called MiCA, crypto firms have until the end of June to obtain a license to allow them to service its clients across the EU bloc. The application, Binance's application made to Greece's market regulator, is said to be turned down, people said. So because Greece turned down the application, the EU bloc as a whole could not be accepted. Just before we continue in the discussion, just tell us what happened here and why did Greece reject the application?
Oh, Greece didn't formally reject the application. We withdraw the application from Greece, right? So I think it's quite important to state that. Okay. And also I think it's very important for us to stress a few things, right? So firstly, we are not leaving Europe, okay? We remain very committed to Europe. We are pursuing authorization with another EU member state. On Greece, is very unfortunate what transpired. We are given the understanding that our applications was fully compliant. We are given the understanding that our application will be approved until the 11.5 hour, where there appears to be a change of heart. And that obviously caught us by surprise and caught, you know, some of the other national agencies that were given the understanding that our application will be approved as well by surprise. But be it as it may, it is just very, very unfortunate with this sudden turn of heart or turn of event in Europe. But we are not leaving Europe. We are committed to Europe. What we are focusing on right now is to make sure our users are protected. We are working to make sure that we are complying with the laws of Europe after 30th of June in the first instance. But we are working very tirelessly with EU member states on that front to make sure that we remain compliant and we are pursuing authorization. EU is important, right? Not from a financial standpoint for us. I mean, EU from financially to us, it doesn't impact our business much. But it's our pronouncement, and it just shows our ambition to continue to work with regulators. We are the most regulated entity globally, and we are the only one of the global exchange that has a home regulator. You know, our activities are regulated on an end-to-end basis by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority at ADGM. From things like listings to AML to KYC to transaction monitoring to even our wallet management to risk management to governance, right? So nobody else can lay claim to that on that front other than our individual local licenses. We are the only one with a home regulator on that front. So I think it's very important. And as an ex-regulator, I can tell you this, and I tell many of the regulators this. It is very important for regulators to understand and acknowledge that a few things. Firstly, for a company that's willing to, that's able to, that's compliant with your regulations, to approve them, to bring them under your oversight. So it's always better to bring companies under your oversight so that you have proper oversight, proper supervision, you have proper cooperation. You can, work with the company to make sure that the users are protected, there are proper safeguards, etc., etc. So it's better to do that rather than keep them in the gray zone, right? So, very wise and smart regulators will know that. Always try to bring companies that are willing to. Of course, you must be willing to. Many companies choose to operate in the gray areas. We don't. We want to work very closely with the regulators on that front. So, and we are committed with the amount of investment that come to compliance. Our compliance headcount accounts for close to 25% of our total headcount. And that demonstrates our ambition, our commitment in terms of regulations. And the fact that we are the only one that spends close to 18 months to pursue a global license with ADGM to have a home regulator, and nobody else does that. Just demonstrate that commitment. So I think that's very important. I think the second very important part that regulators may not understand is that we are a very important market liquidity provider, and important place for market discovery. And if we are not in that marketplace, at the end of the day, it's not only the regulators, but consumers lose out, right? Because we offer such deep liquidity, we offer the best bid-ask spread for consumers, not only for retail, but institutions and corporates. So if you don't have that, what it means that consumers are paying much higher prices, significantly much higher prices, much greater fees, and you don't have access to proper liquidity. And you trade in the marketplace, and you know how important liquidity is, right? So if you want to take positions, you can't take positions. You want to exit positions, you can't exit positions. And that is something that regulators need to be mindful of in terms of consumer protection, right? So liquidity is extremely, extremely important. So just let me, stop my commentary at that. We are committed. We will continue to work for Europe authorization.
This is a blog post, and maybe help us just verify if this is there's any truth to this. So the blog reported on June 29th, which is earlier today, that CZ, which is the founder of Binance, said in an interview that 2 EU countries have tried to host Binance's MiCA license application, triggering a form of competition. On speculation that ECB President Christine Lagarde was involved in stopping the approval, Zhao said he had seen the same claims online, but that there was no official document to support them. So first, maybe just react to what I just read, but largely, what is the next step here? The June 30th deadline is approaching.
Well, so for our users, firstly, their funds are always safe and secure. You have our assurance on that. We are properly regulated by a home regulator. Where we have sent out communications to all our users. If they have any questions, please contact our official Binance customer support so that we can address individual queries on that. Also, please be aware of scams, right? So there are a lot of scammers, especially when you see something like that. We will never ask you for your password, 2FA codes, private keys, transfer of assets, right? So our customers, please be very mindful on that front. On our conversation with regulators, they are necessarily confidential, so I won't go into areas of who we are engaging on that front. But indeed, we are engaging, and many of the regulators understand the point that I mentioned just now. It's very important to bring such a big market player into oversight rather than keep us outside. It adds to market diversity, it adds to market liquidity, and it's much better to extract full cooperation and full oversight over such an important market player like ourselves, right, which is a financial super app of the world. So we are continuing to work on that front, and we will demonstrate our commitment to regulators that we are fully compliant. We have built very robust governance, compliance, risk control measures on that front. And for our users that use us, they'll know that we don't spare any resources towards protecting their interests and towards areas of risk control, which is always underestimated in our industry.
So then final question on Europe. What is the next step Binance is going to take to secure its operations in Europe following this dispute?
As I mentioned, we continue to work with the national regulators. As and when we have more news and clarity on that front, we will provide them when the time is right. But a lot of this, discussion are confidential, and until we reach a further level of certainty, we will just keep them confidential, because the regulators also require us to make sure that we engage them on a confidential basis.
Yes. The discussion as to whether or not Binance will re-enter the U.S. or enter the U.S., it's ongoing. Maybe provide us some updates on the discussion you've been having with your colleagues and associates about this issue and some of the regulatory, milestones you would need to see before further clarification can be reached.
Well, I think it's something that is always on our radar. US is an extremely important marketplace, as you know. But, it's a very complex marketplace as well, right? So we are awaiting for the passing of the Clarity Act that will provide much greater clarity on that front. And US is a landscape
Yeah.
that is very diverse, but also diverse not in terms of only participants, but diverse in also the interpretation of laws and requirements and federal versus state, right? Which can be challenging at times. So that Clarity Act will definitely provide a lot more clarity into what is available in the marketplace, and is a huge marketplace. Don't get me wrong. But then internally, we still have to go through a few things, right? Including making sure that we are ready, making sure that we get all the right approvals of the board and of the shareholders. This is a major corporate decision. And the truth is, based on what I understand, there are many parties in the US that's lobbying against us, against our entry, because we offer the most dynamic of marketplaces, lowest of fees, and US users will benefit greatly with our entrance. But you also mean that the existing players will suffer in terms of fee compression when consumers get a lot more choice and can trade at much lower cost compared to what they have today. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lobbying against our entrance. So we shall see.
Okay. Well, I'd like to follow up on one more issue. So we spoke a few months ago about the accusations pressed against Binance about funneling funds through Iran. Now, you have pursued legal action against some of these publications who have made these accusations that the Binance team has deemed inaccurate. They followed up again. In May, there was another article written on the Wall Street Journal. Iran moved billions through Binance to fund regime, continuing into this month. Can you just comment on this?
Well, so we have taken out lawsuits against them. We will continue to pursue aggressively to make sure that all this falsehood stops, and there's proper justice for all this falsehood against us. In the interim, we work very closely with law enforcement agencies, with regulators. We have mapped out the entire series of events, the fund tracking, to demonstrate that all these allegations are false and untrue, and show them to the regulators and law enforcement agencies. And we work very closely with law enforcement agencies, right? So in the course of the last year, we have 71,000 requests coming through us. And in many jurisdictions, even where we are not licensed, we get commendation letters, right, from law enforcement agencies to really thank us for helping them to fight illicit crimes, which they don't see from anybody else on that front, right? So we continue to work tirelessly. And our ambition is to continue to work to fight all of these illicit crimes. As you can demonstrate, we have published various blogs on that front to show that, the percentage of exposure has diminished drastically over the course of the past 1.5 years, right? So from beginning of 2024 to middle of 2025, it dropped by 97%. And when you benchmark us against the next 6, largest exchange, actually, we are much better than many of those, right? So, but, as with anything, there's always areas of improvement. So we continue to look at areas that we can improve upon in terms of our compliance strategy, our framework, to make sure that we are even much more effective going forward on that front. So it's a continuous journey on that front. So, but rest assured, we will continue on these two fronts to make sure that we are tireless in terms of our efforts to fight illicit crimes on the one front. And secondly, we're also tireless to bring all this injustice against us to justice.
Could the issue be that there's just too many degrees of separation between, let's say, Binance and the originator of the fund that is deemed to be illegal or fraudulent? So it's like holding,
It's 3 to 6 hops away. Right? So you know this. And I'm not quite sure whether the man in the street or some of the journalists are savvy enough. So it means, in traditional terms, you transfer money from one bank account to another, and to another, to another. So after that transfer leave Binance, which we have no control over, 3 to 6 hops later, they get some exposure. And the exposure is not to the magnitude that was even mentioned, right? It's not even, I don't believe, based on the figure that I saw, is even 10% or 5%. It's minuscule. And it's not directly attributable, because money is fungible, right? So when funds get transferred to somebody else, to another platform, and that platform has a lot of money coming in, a lot of money going out. of that platform, right? It's not on our platform. And they say, oh, they try to attribute it back to us 6 or 3 hops prior.
Yeah.
That's really unfair. We have no control over those things, right? So that is the genesis, I think, of some of those baseless allegations, and really is to the very uninformed, on a very uninformed basis. And I do think that is totally false to any informed person looking at the funds flow and the tracing of funds on that front. So we'll continue to defend ourselves robustly on that.
Okay, looking ahead, based on the conversation we've had today about Binance's recent developments and new products, is Binance turning into a fintech company more than just a crypto company?
Well, I like to think ourselves as more than just a fintech company. We are part of financial infrastructure going forward. We are part of financial super app. And to me, I do want us to be a very important part of the financial ecosystem going forward. And that means offering a lot more product suites compared to what we have previously. So if you look at throughout the course of this year, we offer, our users exposure to trading on commodities, to petrochemicals, to US stocks, to private market opportunities. But, we continue to move on that front. So we are continuing to look at the product suite that we need to expand into to provide, all-in-one platform where all the investment needs of our users and investors can be fulfilled using one single financial application.
If Binance is evolving into this all-in-one super financial app, then should regulators be evaluating Binance as an all-in-one financial app as opposed to a crypto company? I understand maybe there's some differences in terms of how those two can be regulated. Yeah.
Our product offerings differ based on region, right? So again, on that front, we have to respect the local requirements, the local rules and requirements. But where it's available, I think all these products are available to users. Where it's not available, a fraction of it is available to users depending on the licensing status of us in those countries and what are the rules and regulations in those countries, right? But that's definitely our ambition. That's definitely the way to go. We will secure a lot more licenses in the course of future, and we are working through a few of those as well. So, this is our way to continue to push towards local deployment and to support our users wherever they are.
If we speak again in 2030, which is a few years away, not too long away, and if we look back at the last decade and we had to evaluate how blockchain technology has transformed global financial systems, how would you answer that, do you think?
Well, so that's a long time in the future. So if I remind you, Binance is only a 9-year-old company, right? So you talk about 2030 is another 4 years out. But, throughout the course of this year, the exponential growth that we experience, the area of growth and the area of expansion in terms of platform, every year is very different. So by 2030, when we have this conversation, I do hope that, our user pool has grown closer to the 3 billion ambition that we want it to be, right? In terms of our asset product suite, it is much more comprehensive compared to what we see today. We are in a lot more jurisdiction compared to today, and we continue to support our users in what they need. So I think first and foremost, our users is always at the front and center. We have to fulfill our user needs. We have to create the best platform to support them in terms of their use of the user demand, in terms of products, in terms of trading, going forward. Agentic AI by then will be a big part of our life. Blockchain infrastructure will be a big part of our life. So I do believe by then we will be a very important player within the financial ecosystem and financial infrastructure. And it's because of that that we continue to work tirelessly as a team to fulfill that and to meet that ambition.
My final part of the interview, I'd like to ask you about something completely unrelated to Binance. I want to talk about monetary regimes and the history of Singapore in particular. I just traveled to Singapore for the first time in my life, I told you offline, and I was amazed just reading about the history of the city. You're Singaporean, you previously worked at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And so while visiting, I read a little bit more about the history of Singapore, which I didn't before, and I was amazed at how the economy has transformed from a rural agricultural and fishing town into a global commercial center and industrial center for transportation of logistical goods, as well as banking center, in a span of only a few decades. And when I talked to some people about how this was able to happen, one of the reasons was the stability of the financial regime and the monetary regime. So what has Singapore done that maybe other regimes around the world can learn from? In other words, how has Singapore transformed from a fishing town, an agricultural farming town, to a global commercial center in only a few decades?
Well, so I mean, first of all, I'm very, very privileged to have been born and raised in Singapore. I've seen,
Yeah.
what our founding father, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, from third world to first world, right? So the
Yes.
transformation of Singapore is something that I witnessed and I'm growing up as a boy to now. And it's amazing. It's truly amazing. But a lot of it goes down to long-term planning. And we are very fortunate and very blessed to have, very good leadership throughout all the years and decades, right? Ever since we achieved our independence. By now we are into our fourth generation of leaders. And, the leadership succession and planning is something that Singapore is very careful. And Singapore is able to take a very, very long-term view of things and become very strategic and invest into the long term to make sure that, all the attractive parts of it are in place, right? In many democracies around the world, the challenge is on a 4-year cycle. People have to go through elections. There's no consistency in terms of policy approaches, and there's no consistency in terms of execution, right? Where Singapore is able to take a very long-term approach and make investments in all the right area, be it infrastructure, be it talent pool, be it policies, including monetary policies that you mentioned, right? Singapore is one of the few countries that do, manage because it's such a small economy. We don't manage based on interest rate. We manage based on foreign exchange, etc. So it's a managed float basis for our currency to manage inflation because most of inflation are imported. So there is a lot of consideration, but we are very blessed to have very, very good policymakers. We have very, very good legislators and regulators on that front. They always take the long-term view of things. So we are blessed. I'm very privileged to be part of the central bank that you mentioned. And at that point in time, I joined in the 90s, and that's where Singapore went through a big boom and strategic thinking, right? In terms of trying to move from, at that point in time, we are already a financial center, but a regional financial center. Move from a regional financial center to a global financial center to be a global powerhouse, right? So at that point in time, in the 90s, if you remember, the predominant marketplace in Asia Pacific, the largest was Tokyo, Japan. Hong Kong is very, very vibrant. Singapore wants to make sure that, we not only surpass that, but we benchmark ourselves with the best in the world, Zurich, London, etc. So at that point in time, things like the private wealth management strategy, the asset management strategy came into play. The insurance strategy, including, how do you bring about more dynamic reinsurance and captive insurance sector on that? How do you bring trading floors from the US? I was posted to the US for 2 years to talk to the BlackRocks and Goldman Sachs of the world to try to bring them to Singapore at that point in time. So I'm very privileged to be part of that formation years of Singapore and seeing the results that we are seeing today. I think it's just long-term strategy and making sure execution is robust on that front.
I think a lot of countries around the world are asking themselves, what can we do to learn from Singapore? How do we redo this model? Is it just as simple as reducing taxes on capital gains and other advantages? Is that the core ingredient for attracting capital? If I were to start my own country tomorrow from scratch,
I think it's
which is basically,
one of many things, right? So the ease of setting up business, the ease of bringing the talent pool, the taxation regime must be attractive enough, right? The infrastructure, but it goes beyond that. It's the ecosystem, right? So if you look at it in the 90s, when we look at how to develop, people say, and I have this conversation with many international participants at that point in time. people's view of Singapore was a very boring town compared to Hong Kong. So none of the investment bankers and trading people wants to be based in Singapore. There's a lack of international schools in Singapore. There's a lack of parks and recreation. So the government went through a building phase to relax certain things, to make Singapore much more dynamic, much more fun, but also bring in, international schools, building, parks, connectors, etc., to make it a very vibrant, livable city. So it is very long-term and concerted building in the process. So what you see today is not by chance.
Yes.
It's really long.
Yeah, final question from me here is, right now we have a good balance between government, state planning, and free capital markets. Singapore is described often as one of the world's freest economies. So what do you think should be the appropriate balance for any state between free markets and government control and government planning? You talked about state planning several times, for example.
Well, to me, if you look at small states, the way small states develop and the way big states develop will be very, very different, right? So if you look at small states, it's not only Singapore that has developed extremely well. If you look at UAE, I'm another person who is very bullish about UAE and Singapore. They have developed extremely well. Again, the same type of strategy, planning for the long term, be first mover advantage, allow for experimentation in things like AI and blockchain, right? So they have done it extremely well. But small states and big states are very, very different in terms of how you develop, because in big states, you have a big domestic market. The way you compete is going to be you're not going to be as nimble and as agile compared to the smaller states, right? In terms of how you can bring about changes much faster. The regulations, I'm sure where you are, you probably have many regulators compared to one single regulator in Singapore. That makes life easier. And you have many legislation, and the entire setup is very different. So for big states, it's different, but it's how do you make sure that you continue to be dynamic and competitive, and how do you support innovation? That's very important. I've seen many big states trying to shut the door to innovation, trying to block the influx of talent, the right talent into the countries, because the right talent bring a lot of new ideas, bring a lot of new business activity, brings a lot of new investments. How do you bring those into it instead of forcing them out, right? And some of the taxation policies I see in some of the big states throughout the world are actually forcing talent out to the benefit of others. And to me, that will have long-term repercussions for them.
Okay. I'd love to continue this conversation with you another time and talk more about immigration policies and attracting talent. Singapore has done many things right, so a good case study. Anyway, let's talk about that next time. Thank you very much for your updates on Binance. Where can we follow Binance for more information?
Go to our website, Binance.com.
All right. We'll put the website down there. All right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look at your app.
All right. And also the X account as well. Thank you very much, Richard. It was a pleasure speaking with you as always. I hope to speak with you again soon. Take care for now.
All right. Take care for now.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe.